On this episode of Bootstrap Business Wisdom, I talked to Sonja Leason. Sonja talks to me about her journey through entrepreneurship that started with her being homeless. She had a son just after her 18th birthday and has built businesses from nothing. She knows how to survive just on fresh air. She knows how to get you into the mindset of being able to actually move the dial of your business. So when you're sitting there thinking to yourself, I'm not sure I've got the money to do this, this is the podcast that you need to listen to. Okay, Sonja, thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Before we get too far into things, are you all right just to give the listeners a bit of a background on yourself, how you became an entrepreneur, what your journey's been like up to today?
Okay, so it's quite a wild story. I was actually homeless at 16. I had my son in a homeless hostel when I was about 17. I was pregnant at 17, had my son when I was just turned 18, and I spent a few years in a homeless hostel. So when I had to work up out of that, the only thing I knew was getting a job. So I bounced from job to job, from packing factories to chambermaid in hotels. And I just kept working and working. I had 3 jobs all the time. And I was a single mum, going to college and just building and building. And it wasn't until I was probably 30, I had quite a life-changing event. My son was very ill. And I just got to the point where I was like, what am I doing this for? You know, if it isn't for me, I'm making money for everyone else. I was always in sales. I managed to work up to get into sales. And I was always top salesperson. And you know, when you're looking at your monthly targets and you're like, wow, sis, that's all going into somebody else's bank account. So, my son was really ill and I just couldn't do it anymore. So I just thought there's got to be another way. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I just left my job and set up my business the following day. So that was 10 years ago now.
Wow. And what was the business?
Same one as I'm running. So we just touched on whether you have businesses that go under or you keep the same one. So yeah, I run Love Mondays. So we are a business growth consultancy. So we go into businesses and we look at their sales and marketing pipelines. So we automate their pipelines, build their sales teams, so help them to grow and scale through automation and teams.
I love it. Wow. Okay, so loads to unpack here. When I left school, I had no qualifications and did random jobs and eventually stumbled into sales jobs. Do you think that you ended up in sales because it's considered like a low-skilled job to begin with?
I think so. And I think because there's such a high turnover of sales staff generally in businesses, they do 12 months and leave. I think it's easy to get into. However, I do believe somebody saw something in me. And looking back now, it was probably fate. You know, I do this for businesses that are turning over millions. But back then, I didn't know that was going to be the path.
Yeah.
But I think somebody saw something in me, and it was actually a recruitment agency I'd sent my CV into. And I'd been turned down for office admin jobs and because I was a single mom, I was, 18 years old, I had a baby, I didn't really have a fixed address, and all the other stuff that comes with that. It was just impossible, which is why I ended up really working my way up. And it wasn't until this recruitment agent really saw something in me, and I got a job for quite a prestigious company. And I was top sales. They put me into like corporate sales partners. So then I was working with Jaguar Land Rover and, it just grew and grew from there.
Yeah.
But if it wasn't for that, probably that person that saw, that I was chatty and, that
Outgoing.
kind of personality. Yeah, and you need that in sales. I could build rapport. I can talk to anybody because of the life that I've had. I've got an experience in so many different areas. But yeah, it's easy to get into, isn't it? It's not easy to be good at, but it's easy to get into.
It's also, I think, it's not just about being chatty and being able to build rapport with people. That's great, but it's the resilience, and obviously that person has been able to see that in your background. It's an interesting point, though, because I sort of feel like a lot of the businesses that I meet are going to struggle, not because of their product and not because of their idea, but because their owner doesn't like the idea of doing sales. So they'll often say, like, I've got this idea, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that. All I need, I'm not the salesperson, I just need to find a good salesperson, I'll be away. And I sort of think, that's not going to work. You might not be a salesperson, but if you can't talk about it, like,
How can you train staff to?
like, how is anyone? You're just going to bring in a random person it isn't their company, and you're going to expect them to, because it's in the early days. Did you find like it's just a lot of it is in your passion as the business owner why people want to work with you?
I think when I first started in sales, I'm clever and I work out systems. So I was in advertising, which deadline driven, target, really high pressured, target driven environments. And my boss used to hate me. They just couldn't manage me because I was too clever. I used to figure out the system. And I knew that if I was getting recurring revenue, if the advertising worked for my clients, they'd come back to me. So within, the first few months, I was getting the business to a point where I had so much recurring revenue, I didn't need to go into the office.
Yeah.
And you're talking like 10 years ago, before digital advertising even came along. It was print advertising back then. And they just didn't know how to manage me. So because I've figured out the system for so many years, and looking back, I didn't know I was realising that I was doing that. I was just kind of finding my groove with it, and it would naturally happen. Whereas now, looking back, I've kind of learned all of that from years and years ago that I can implement into it now. But it's an interesting one, yeah.
That's I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs have got a similar story. Like we're all probably unemployable.
Yeah.
I had a similar thing, doing sales, working in recruitment, destroying the targets that they set and never having to really appear to do any work.
Yeah.
And they didn't like it. And I can understand now as a business owner why they didn't like it, because you can't scour that. You can't teach everybody to think that way. You can teach everybody to make 100 phone calls and send 100 emails. You can't teach everybody to like look a bit deeper and work smarter. But it's interesting that from working smarter, I was able to destroy my sales targets. From working smarter, you were able to destroy your sales targets. And there's a lot of people out there, I think, that they're obsessed with the output rather than the outcome. If you've started a business yourself, you're in a bootstrapped business, and maybe you've borrowed some money to do it, and you've got to prove to people that you're trying. So you end up doing stuff because you'd feel bad not working sort of till your fingers bleed.
Yeah, and it's measurable. So those 100 calls a day, it's measurable.
Yeah,
whereas
but it's not actually
generating anything.
No, but certain people, I don't know if you are the same as me on this, you have a gut feeling as to whether this is working or whether it isn't, and there's no need for me I don't have to justify this to anybody.
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing, so just leave me alone.
And that's probably why we never got on in corporate, because you're kind of a link in a chain in a whole process. There's no room for innovation, really. There's no room for you to think outside the box or get bigger than your role, because there's a manager above you and there are people to the sides of you. So there's kind of nowhere to innovate. They've made a process and you fit into that process. And that's not bad. That's not wrong. It's just that there's certain types of people for every job. And that just was not me. I didn't know what I didn't know. And I think because of my background and my childhood, I was never taught, nobody knew about business in my family. I didn't have any of that. Nobody was really self-employed, so I'd never learned that there was another way of doing things. I was just kind of being my natural self, and it wasn't until I stepped into the world of entrepreneurship I was like, oh my god, there's people like me. I'm not the weird one. I always felt like I didn't fit in. And then I realised that's why I don't fit in, because that world just isn't my world.
And do you think like the process whereby like you were homeless and you had to find all these different solutions, actually looking back now is a bit of a, I'm not saying that people should go down that road on purpose, but I'm just saying, do you think that was almost training ground for you're going to have to find solutions for shit yourself here?
I'm shit hot with money. So coming back to the bootstrap whole storyline, I can live on fresh air, When I had my son, he was a baby, I lived on £82 a week.
Wow.
And that's for like gas, electricity. And at one point, I remember distinctly thinking, for some reason, I just felt like I needed to get contents insurance. When I got my first council flat, it was this horrible high-rise place. And I just thought, I need to get house insurance. So I just couldn't afford it, because £82 a week is literally your gas, electricity. I didn't eat, I couldn't afford food. My son used to get milk from the clinic because I couldn't afford to buy anything really for him. Anyway, someone set fire to my flat.
Wow.
And so from those days, as hard as it was at the time, the thing that it's taught me is I know how to live on fresh air.
Yeah.
So when you're bootstrapping something, I can live a champagne lifestyle on lemonade budget, you know, because it's just so natural to me, and I've got this ability to just understand where my money's at all times, and it comes from a place of trauma. It's probably not a good thing, but the positive side of that is I've touched wood to this day. Since I've kind of got into a groove with it, I've never, you know, had to struggle for money.
Yeah.
COVID was a bit hit and miss, but, you know, I think it was for everybody. But yeah, I think it just comes down to those experiences and getting yourself out of them.
And now, obviously, you've got a company that goes in and solves people's sales problems, sales and marketing, or just
yeah. So we do automation as well.
Right.
So yeah,
Okay.
automating the pipelines.
And going back to what I was saying at the beginning, you know, the founder of the company has got to be passionate about the product, right? So do you find that when you go to these companies to try and solve their problem for them, they are companies that have just got no idea on how to sell anything, or are they companies whereby the founder knows how to sell it, but he can't scale it?
Yeah, sometimes. I think people are averse to sales quite often. I see sales as helping people. You have got a solution. You've been put on this planet because you've got a gift from, you know, your experiences or your passions. You found a gap in the market, whatever that is. There's a reason why you're running this business as you're running it now. And I believe there are people out there that are willing to pay you a premium for that knowledge. They are desperate for you to help them with that. But people that are averse to sales, they don't see sales as that. They see it as pushy. They see it as, you know, there's a million and one different things. So often it could be that they're averse to sales, but quite often with the businesses that are already doing well, I think they've grown it to the capacity that they can do it as an entrepreneur. Very often they run out of time and they run out of knowledge. And I think you can get businesses to a certain level by yourself. Entrepreneurs are very clever. You can put your skills to many different areas. That's why we run a business, right? But they get it to a point where they're like, okay, I'm falling down, my sales team are always leaving, or I'm recruiting the wrong people, or I just know it can be better than this. But at that point, they have to let that go because they can't scale it any bigger with what they've already got. So we do loads of things like disc psychometric profiling and a bit of therapy sessions even for the business owners, because it is a big step to take it to the next level. You've got to let it go. You've got to start managing your team differently. You've got to start building teams differently. And that's how you get it to the next level ultimately. But they don't know what they don't know.
No. What would you say are some of the most common, I don't know, things that you change in a company whereby they actually start to see their sales turn around? You
said it yourself. They start selling it.
Right.
I don't think they realise how amazing they are. And when someone else comes in and they're like, what the? Like, you're doing all of this stuff. And they think it's normal because they live it every day.
Yeah.
And it's not until someone else comes in and goes, that and that, let's pull all of that together. Let's put that into your marketing message. Let's automate all of these processes. Because they're doing a lot of it manually.
Yeah.
I'm working with a client at the moment. We've been working together for quite a while. And they've been working globally. And they've been doing it all manually. And I sit there and I'm like, so hold on, you're onboarding people from New Zealand and, you know, all over these time zones. And you've literally been emailing them to be like, hi, do you want to do this? Sign on, get all your delegates on 4 or 5 different time zones. I'm like, you could just automate that. And it has just absolutely changed everything in their business because they're not physically sitting there. They were the bottleneck.
Yeah.
Tech's out there. You don't have to do all of these things. So we started off by automating their onboarding processes a bit more. They do courses, training. So we started off by automating those processes, but then it's gone to, okay, now I've got more time. How can I scale this? So now we've moved on to their lead generation, to their open courses instead of, they were doing it in the boardroom basically, to more thinking about how can you get members of the public coming in. So we're building different income streams now, and they just wouldn't have had time to do that if they didn't look at the reasons why they couldn't sell more.
That's interesting. So like, you know, it's not just sales and marketing then, because by the sounds of it, to begin with, you're looking at their customer journey.
Yeah, totally.
And then
client onboarding.
From their customer journey, we're starting to see like, okay, great, now we could now look at getting more customers to go through that journey, because I guess when they were doing it manually, they were probably at capacity maybe.
Overwhelmed, yeah. And the thought of scaling to them is like, I just don't physically have any more gas in the tank to scale this business.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, actually, if you just did that and that and that, they're like, oh my God. And it just frees up all of that brain space. So we build tech first. So tech comes first. And then after that, we start looking at where can you partner, where can you recruit, to kind of build the business around that tech.
So it's not so, like, at the beginning, someone could mistake this for like, okay, you and your team are going to go in and start making sales calls for somebody. That's not what we're talking about at all.
No,
We're talking
business
about
strategy.
more consultancy and strategy. Sit down, let's find out where the problems are here.
And I would say everyone's different. So I've got another client at the moment. Theirs was the sales team. They were recruiting in. The business owner was doing it by themselves, which is great. But what I find is the business owner generally recruits what they need internally. They don't recruit what they need to do the job. So say, for instance, the business owner's feeling quite unsupported. They would naturally, in interview situations, they will naturally be drawn to people who are very supportive or helpful. Okay, that's great for a PA, not so good for a salesperson. These people, they're not going to be picking up the phone. They haven't got that kind of results-driven personality. So you need to shift them out of that mindset. And you can't really do that in your own business always. You can't see the wood for the trees sometimes. And so they get stuck in this cycle of, why are all my staff leaving? And I'm like, because you're recruiting the people that you need rather than the people for that job. So it's about coming in and looking at it and saying, right, we need to create this job role, not what you need as a business owner. This is actually a business job role, because there's other people out there recruiting for salespeople, and you've got to have those specific skill sets regarding business actually working, and also the personality profile of the person that's going to be doing this job, because otherwise they can't do it.
And how did you? I'm really interested to know how you got to this place of feeling confident to be able to solve these problems for people. Because we talked about how you got into sales, and then when you said, you know what, I'm going to go and do this on my own. Did you go straight to this business, or was there steps towards getting where this is now? Because I'm not seeing a direct jump straight from sales to I'm going to advise people on.
Many turning points. When I left my job and went self-employed, 2014, after my son had been really ill, I had nothing. I was homeless again. I'd lost my job because I had to care for my son. He was out of school for months and months. It took about 2 years for him to get better. So I really had nothing, and I just thought, if I'm going to work up from here, I might as well do it for myself. Got literally nothing to lose. So when I first started, honestly, I was working £15 an hour doing admin. And
like
I just
remote.
Yeah, remote, like VA type work. I was going out networking to find business. I mean, you've got to remember, business has moved on a lot in 10 years. There weren't really digital stuff back then. But when I was in advertising, you could just start seeing it changing. So it changed from print advertising to digital advertising when I was employed. So that kind of started me on the path. And then I got into doing more tech stuff. So we were doing websites, and then we moved on to e-commerce. Then we moved on to automation. And going back to the bootstrap thing, I partner. So what happens then is you get access to these teams and this knowledge of people. So one of my major turning points was partnering with an automation company that I met at Dent, actually. And she just brought all of this knowledge to me, and I was like, oh my God, and then again, you've got 12 months of learning. They're doing projects, you're picking things up, you're seeing what works. And it's just been test and measure the whole time. And touch wood, I'm very lucky that I didn't see it in myself. People see it in me, and they call me up and they're like, hi, can you come and help with this? I'm like, yeah.
I love that. So, and a lot of your clients, have they just been on that journey with you then? So maybe you started with them doing something, and then you've learned something and mentioned it to them, and has it gone more like that?
Yeah, I've kind of got to a point now where I know what I'm doing. Not always, but yeah, most of the time. So generally they come to me with a problem and they don't know the answer. So they're like, I'm just stuck. So I'll sit with them. We'll do a half day, or we'll do a day session. We sit down. Sometimes my partner, who I partner with, Steph, she comes in and we automate the whole, we've got Post-it notes on the walls. We're looking at the whole processes. And I just think to get where I was to where I am, I've had to be very, very good at spotting problems. I've had to be very good at overcoming problems. And I've also had to be very good at just having the resilience and kind of, there isn't an answer here. We've just got to figure it out. And I just believe that. I truly believe that's...
Have you had stages in your journey whereby, I don't know, it just isn't going to plan? I'm not getting enough clients. And what did you have to learn from that, period?
So going back to what you said, when that happens, generally... it's usually a shift in the business. So I think you work on a timeline of people, and when it's ready to shift, you really notice it. You're like, this just isn't going right. I've got nightmare clients. Any of those external circumstances to me says you need to do some work on yourself. So I need to look at where I'm playing small. I need to look at, am I speaking to the wrong market? So that was the biggest one for me most recently. I got to the point where I was like, this just isn't shift. This is hard work. And I'd had somebody not pay me. I'd had 2 people not pay me, which never happens. I've just been extremely lucky with the people I work with. That just does not happen to me. I've never had to chase debts. So I started having these external things coming at me, and that's when I sit down and I'm like, right, there's something here that needs to shift. This isn't working. And that's an external message, really, that you need to stand back. So I just stand back and go, right, I speak to people. I've got a great network of friends that help. Business owners as well. And they'll say, this is what you're not seeing, this is your blind spot. And as soon as I start, implementing that, I go on a lot of courses as well. That really helps, because I think when you run your own business, you get so caught up in the day-to-day that standing back, going on a course, or having a coach stand there and say, right, what are you doing for yourself? Yeah. It helps you get out of that kind of spinning constantly of working on in the business, and actually gets you working on it. And then you can level up. Then
I was just going to say, and then you've got the dilemma then, because you can see there's a problem. You've spoken to your network, or you've been on a course, or spoken to somebody, and they've shined a light on it for you. And then how do you balance out where but I can't just change the whole business today. I need the cash to still come in, but I do also need to change the business.
Yeah, that's a struggle. And you end up running 2 businesses for a while, because you end up servicing the old business and building the new at the same time. Yeah. And it is heavy. I've got 3 now, so I've got a cafe as well. I've got an Airbnb as well.
Why not?
Yeah, I know. And it does sometimes. I sit there and I'm like, Jesus Christ. But it does go, it shifts. And then when it does shift, you kind of, I wouldn't say easy street. I don't think business is ever easy street, but you just kind of feel like, okay, I'm back in control. My clients are paying me, they're happy. Yeah. Just the other day, who even gets this? Someone phoned me up, one of my clients phoned me up and said, we don't think you're charging us enough. Can we pay you another 700 quid? I was like, that is the most amazing thing I've ever heard. But it is because I'm totally aligned to what I'm doing for them. And because I'm totally aligned, and because they're seeing the benefits, then I work with people where it's a win-win, and she said, women in business, we've got to help each other. And I was really emotional about it. And I just think, oh my God, who does that happen to? But it happens to me.
That's amazing. You should have said, can you make it $1,000?
I should round it up. Like, what's the, I know.
No, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So I've got this theory. I haven't really tested it out. It's just come to me recently. And I feel like, after, 25 years of being an entrepreneur, it's only just started to dawn on me that actually it's not that hard being an entrepreneur, right? Just bear with me.
I hope I get there.
Bear with me.
I've got another 15
bear with me.
years.
Bear with me. And I feel like it's not that hard if you really want to do it. Because, for instance, I met this guy a couple of weeks ago who has just started a business washing cars. He comes to your house, he washes your cars. I've got a couple of nice cars, and he comes and he washes cars. And I was just chatting to him about how you're going to make any money out of this. And he was like, it's really difficult, blah, 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 blah. And I spoke to him for a while, and we worked out that if he could just find people that had supercars, he could explain to them that if you have got a supercar and you take it to a normal car wash, there's a reasonable chance that they might scratch your car because of the dirty water and all of that sort of stuff. And so having your car washed at a place like that could cost you $5,000 or more. He'll come to your house, he'll spend the whole day there, he'll polish it, he'll do all of this stuff. And it won't be cheap, but if he could find 20 people like that, then he could make all the money that he wanted to make. We worked this out, right? Because there's 20 working days in the month, if he could just find 20 people like that. And I said to him, on Sunday, there's a supercar event just a mile down the road. You don't have to pay to go. All you've got to do is literally turn up there and explain this to people. You could probably get something knocked up between now and then just to give them. And all of these people probably live local to here, which is local to you. You might find 1, 2, who knows, you might find your 20 customers there. He was like, that'd be good. And I spoke to him a week after, said, how did you get on? He said, I had to go and wash a van on that day. And I just thought to myself,
No.
what's the fucking point?
No.
Like, I just literally wasted all my air
Yeah.
talking to you about it. Like, you don't want this to work. And I've seen it a few times since that. I've seen it a couple of times, and I've thought to myself, maybe it's not as hard as we imagine. Maybe because you actually give a shit about your business,
It's a mindset.
it's going to work out all right for you, as opposed to me saying, you know what, I'd quite like to be a doctor, even though I don't want to be a doctor. And the first time that a hurdle gets thrown in my way, I'm going to fail.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm unemployable. And it wasn't that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. It was that I wanted to make my own rules.
Yeah.
I didn't do it necessarily for money, although, you talk about money, but it's really for freedom, right? And so it doesn't seem that much of a big deal, or it never seemed that much of a big deal to me to have to do things like make phone calls to people, because the trade-off was that, or you got to go to work every day for this other guy.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think about that theory?
It's a mindset. And do you know what's so interesting? Literally yesterday, I had the exact conversation with somebody, different scenario, personal circumstances, but ultimately everything was delivered. Everything. Here you go. Everything's delivered on a plate. No, thanks. I've made the decision. I'm going to wait 2 years. And I'm like, but there's an opportunity. Opportunities don't come along when you've decided to put it in your calendar. When an opportunity comes, you have to take it. And quite often, going back to my past, I do get quite anxious of like, oh my God, everything's going to fail. I'm going to go back to that life. I really don't want to go back to that life. And it's times like that and meeting people like that you just think, I am not that. Fundamentally, my mindset is not that mindset.
Yeah.
So I will never, ever get stuck in that rut. I will never, ever turn down that type of opportunity, because naturally I am a person to, like you were saying, you spot that opportunity. You see how this person can achieve their goals. That isn't something you've read in a book. That's not something you try to do. It's naturally within you to be that person.
Yeah.
And I feel like when you have got that, maybe, yes, it makes it easier to be an entrepreneur, but I don't think everybody does.
No.
I don't think everybody does. And they sabotage themselves. And I think the only thing that gets in the way of people's success is themselves, ultimately.
Yeah.
It's never anybody else.
Yeah, it just like I say, I don't know. I there was another guy that I was talking to who was saying that he's got a problem with his staff. He has a problem with his staff. He doesn't know what to do about it. He should have probably called you actually, right? But
Cool.
he doesn't know what to do about his sales team. They're not doing the sales how he wants. And I said, like, well, just fire them. And he was like, no, I can't just fire them. He was like, well, actually, even more difficult. One of them is my brother-in-law, and blah, 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 blah. I said, listen, you've got one job. You're the CEO of the company, or MD, or whatever you want to call yourself. And your job is to make sure that all of that stuff's working. You're steering the ship. And because of that, you get to come to events like this today, and you get to do all of that stuff. But that's your job.
Yeah.
So just fucking do your job properly.
Yeah.
Go back and sort that shit out, because those people all rely on you for an income, and they all rely on you not steering the ship directly into the rocks.
Yeah.
So what is it you're waiting for?
And also, there's a reason they're not selling. What's the reason? Are they in the wrong job? Do they not feel motivated?
Yeah, do they
Are
not like
pissed
working
off?
for you?
Yeah, what's the...
Why are you scared about talking to them, and
Yeah,
why do
yeah.
they not want to work for you?
Yeah, yeah.
Like, let's deal with it.
Do they not want to earn money? Like, no, I don't believe any salesperson doesn't want the commission. I'm not saying commission's everything. They've got to have a nice working environment. But there's always an issue. And as soon as you iron out that, it's energy flows, right? So from step A to step B, there's an energy flow. And somewhere there, it's blocked. So you just need to go and figure out where that block is.
What about clients who struggle with the idea of charging the amount they need to charge?
Yeah, that's a lot. A lot of people do that. It's a real value thing. So self-worth and worth, as in money, they're intrinsically related. So you can work on somebody's self-worth, and their worth of what they want to charge goes up.
Do you think that they get too caught up on either what their competitors' prices are, or what they somehow, for some reason, anchored themselves to when they made up the price in the first place?
Yeah, and we work on unique selling points, because if you're unique in the market, you can charge what you like. So if you're saying the same as your competitors, if you're selling the same as your competitors, it's a fast race to the bottom, because you'll get quote A and quote B. They're exactly the same, only this one's 10 grand cheaper or 2 grand cheaper. People are going to go for that. So it's always, the whole start with why and everything else. If you can sell on your story, if you can give them something additionally, they're always going to come to you. You align to the right type of person. So I call it a magnetic marketing message. So how do we draw that out of you to make you unique so that you can magnetize the right people to you? Because those are the ones that don't leave. Those are the ones that call you up and say, can I pay you 700 quid?
Yeah.
Because they're so aligned to what you're doing for them. It's not that it can't go wrong. Obviously, if you're a complete dickhead, it's going to.
Yeah.
But if you do what you say you're going to do. So for people that struggle to charge, I would ask them to look in, why do they not feel like they can charge as much as their competitors, or why are they chasing around after money? The money journey is a big one. As somebody that's come from absolutely nothing, it's a wild journey with money, and it jumps with your own, self-worth, I think.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I do a lot of, I'm certified in behavioural economics, and I do a lot of study around that, and pretty much every business I talk to that talks to me about their fees, if you want to call it that, their charges, say it's different in my industry. You don't understand. It's there's so many of people trying to do the same thing. Like, there's people out there doing it for this much, and there's people out there doing it for this much. And I always use the analogy of hamburgers. I always kind of go, you can't really get much more commoditized than hamburgers, right? I can get a cheeseburger in McDonald's for 69p or whatever it is now, but in Five Guys is £8.69, and Five Guys have got a queue out the door. Like, how the fuck is that possible?
Yeah. And in a pub, they're 14 quid.
Right,
You
exactly.
go sit down and have 14 quid.
So it's like, we just need to somehow, but I know what you're saying, Mark, but it's different in my industry. And it's not different in your industry.
It's different in your mindset.
Yeah.
It's your mindset.
Same in every industry. Mobile phones, right? There's not that much difference between them. Like, the iPhone redefined the way the phone looks, and now everything looks like an iPhone.
Yeah.
But yet still people are willing to pay more for one than they are for another. Like,
I don't take no
does
for
that
an
work?
answer. If somebody wants to earn more, there's a way. I don't believe anybody is given an idea without there being a solution. If you had the idea, there's a way of doing it.
Yeah.
But people put their own blocks in the way, whether it be the competitor or the market or this or that or the other. That's just blocks. So if you actually want to achieve charging more, you've got to remove all of those.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Do you think that people get I sort of touched on it before. Do you think that people somehow create this anchor themselves on a price that they made up? So let's say, for instance, they're charging £1,500 a month for whatever it is. After a while, they're sort of weirdly anchored at £1,500 a month. So 3,000 would sound ridiculous. 1,600 might sound okay, but they just made up the 1,500 in the first place.
It comes from nowhere.
Yeah. Do you think that that's a problem? Do you think that people just get...
It's a safety thing.
They just get somehow
Isn't it?
drawn to that number that they're already at?
I think it's a safety thing. They're scared to change it. And also it's the clients they're servicing. So if they then go to a client that's been paying 1,500 quid, it's £3,000 now, they'll be like, what?
Yeah.
But the whole point of business, I think, is to grow and progress. So your prices should go up if you can offer more value, if you've got more knowledge. So as a business, if you're going out there selling widgets and then you've managed to build this whole new AI widget, you're not going to charge the same because it's got more behind it. It's got more value that comes into it. It's got more innovation. It's got more technology, whatever it is. So that's why you put your prices up. You can't just put your prices up and do the same job.
Yeah.
But so going back to what I was saying before, when you up level, you might need a new market. So if you want to charge more, you're probably not going to be serving the market you're working with at 1,500 quid. You need to go and look at the market that are paying £3,000. Why are they paying £3,000? Who are they paying £3,000 to? What is the product that they're paying £3,000 for? Because usually it's different. There are people that just completely undervalue themselves, obviously, and that's the self-worth thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, a lot of people use the analogy of like, Nokia mobile phone used to be 99 quid, and no one ever thought that people would pay, 1,300 quid for a phone. But it wasn't. It's not really the same thing because when they first released the iPhone, they went, look, an iPod, an internet device, and a phone all in one. So there wasn't anybody paying £600 for a phone at the time, but they were paying a few £100 for an iPod and a few £100 for a phone and maybe £500 for a laptop. And so they found that market that way and just combined those products.
They're running 7-figure businesses, 90% off their mobile phones.
Yeah.
And it's just, that is ultimately, yes, it might be 1,300 quid. You couldn't run a 7-figure business off a Nokia. Yeah. You just have to text people. Yeah. You've got 130 characters, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas now you can do that.
Phone people. It's funny how irrelevant the phone has become is been highlighted by my son. I got him a new phone for his birthday, and he's 16, and I left him to set it up. I said, you all right to set it all up? You know what you're doing? Yeah, I can sort it all out. And then he went out, and then a bit later that day, he phoned me via WhatsApp. And I was like, all right, what's up? He was like, yeah, are you all right to come and get me? Well, actually, I don't even think it was WhatsApp. It might have been Discord or something he called me on. But anyway, I was like, yeah, but why are you calling me on this? He said, I haven't set up the phone bit. I said, you said you'd set your phone up. He was like, yeah, but I don't need that, do I?
Yeah.
I was like, but you won't be able to make calls. He was like, I am calling you.
We're on it right now.
So it was like just the difference between two generations. Like, he doesn't even have the little phone symbol that's down in the bottom four things.
Oh, yeah.
Like, it's not in his bottom four things. It's somewhere in a folder hidden away where it will never be needed.
Yeah, but it's wild because you just can't have a phone conversation with anyone. You're in the car, it cuts off. Like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
he had completely set up his phone, and it didn't involve setting up the phone bit.
So it's all on the internet.
Yeah.
It's not over the cellular network.
Crazy.
Oh my God.
Okay, so if there's someone who's sitting there listening to this podcast thinking to themselves like, wow, like, you know, so Sonja's been able to somehow go from being homeless to running her own business, and you've had that business now for 10 years. And they're sitting there thinking to themselves like, yeah, but I just haven't got the money to start my business.
Me neither.
Like,
neither.
How do you answer that? Someone, because there's got to be somebody who's thinking like, if I could just save up the money, then I could start a business.
No, I don't agree with that. I started with a laptop, which was Windows, and the battery was so bad, I had to keep it plugged in at all times. So that's how I started. My journey was service-based, so I didn't know any different back then. I was time for money. I thought that was just how you earned money.
Yeah.
So you can set up service-based free. The pivotal change for me, I touched on before, was partnerships. You can partner with someone. You only pay for them when you get the project on.
Yeah.
So you haven't got staff, you haven't got holiday pay, you haven't got sick pay, you haven't got any of that stuff. So that for me was the brilliant way of being able to get help and get the knowledge without me having to upfront any of the costs.
Yeah.
So that's another great way. I think there's always a way. Maybe you have to start smaller. Interestingly, I was speaking to somebody that I know who's going for investment over in America, and she said they're very, very different. They don't bootstrap anything. They just go for money.
Yeah.
But it means that you go from zero to hero very, very quickly, whereas my way definitely wasn't fast.
Yeah.
That was limited by my knowledge as well. What I know now and what I knew then were very, very different. You know, I had nothing back then. I had no resources whatsoever. And so my business did reflect that. You know, I was just time for money, service-based, admin-based. And that wasn't necessarily because I lacked the knowledge. I just lacked the knowledge of how to turn my knowledge into a business.
Yeah.
But there is always a way. I truly believe that.
Do you think it makes a difference when do you think that people need to, if they want to do it, they have to go all in? Or do you think that they can just put one foot in and give it a try while there's...
Yeah, I've worked with both. I don't really do plan B. Like, I don't believe in a plan B. I've got plan A, and that's I want to make it a success. I don't have a plan B. So people who are a bit 1 foot in, 1 foot out, I would question whether it was the right thing for them. Why aren't they 2 feet in? Like, I've always been 2 feet in. Like, this is my life. There's no ifs or buts about it. And I have worked with both. There are people, a lot of startups, they might invest in the idea, get a website, you know, but if they fall down at the sales or whatever, then they're not going to get anywhere. But I would say you do need to be all in. It's too challenging, isn't it, without kind of having that behind you?
I think so. I think especially if you're, you know, all right, you know, you're probably all in if you're raising investment funds as well. Otherwise, you wouldn't get the investment. But if you're bootstrapping a business, there's a danger, I think, that because you haven't got the cash flow you want, you can get distracted by other things, other business ideas, or another job or a part-time bit of work or something else. And ultimately, all of those things are just going to make your journey much, 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 much longer.
Yeah.
You know, without the focus of being able to go, this is it, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And this is what I'm thinking about. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be out there like making phone calls or walking the streets, knocking on doors, or you don't necessarily have to be doing those things, but your brain, I think, needs to be focused on that. what's the problem I've got here and how the hell am I going to solve it? Because there is no one right answer, right? You're going to need to try about 450 different things, and one of them might work a bit.
And you solve that one, there's just another one.
Yeah.
And that's what I've come to learn. You always think, oh, I'll get to this point and then I'll be able to relax, or I'll get to this point and be fine. It's not the case.
No.
You just come up against the next level, the next level. I was talking to my son about this. I'm from the 80s. So I grew up with Sonic the Hedgehog, and it is exactly the same. You get to the end of the level, you have to hit the man 8 times. You die, you lose your life, you're just on the edge. And then finally you hit him and you get rid of the gremlin, whatever, and you move up to the next level, and there's more rings and there's green trees, and it's like this whole other world that you didn't know, that you didn't have before, and life's exactly the same. You just keep going to the next level, kill the man, get to the next level, kill the man, and that is just it. You just keep going, and you've got to get comfortable with that. I think the only people that are success are the ones that don't give up at the end of the level. You just have to recognize you're at the end of that level. You've just got to kill the man, and you'll go up to the next one. And it's the people that have enough, or they don't have the strength and resilience to be able to get to the next level. Those are the people that that don't carry on with it.
How do you manage to, this is a bit of a deep question, right? But how do you manage to have contentment or happiness if you work that way, which I agree with, but how do you manage to recognise where you've got to?
I don't do that.
I mean, you've already told us where you came from, and if you're constantly fighting the end of level boss to get to the next level, do you have a way of being able to reflect and have some form of contentment with where you are?
There are gaps in between when you're collecting the rings.
Okay.
You're walking through a nice land and meeting your nice girlfriend and, whatever, like Sonic the Hedgehog did, until you get to the next baddie. So I think, no, I don't do that. I'm very I'm a mind person. I constantly have to be thinking about things.
Yeah.
And my dad was in Mensa. He had like an IQ of like 145 or something.
Okay.
And I've been brought up around that kind of mental energy, I suppose. And unfortunately, I do get quite bored. So work gives me a real challenge, a mental challenge.
Yeah.
And I want to be the best person I can be. And I just keep doing those things.
One mentor that I work with taught me that for happiness, you have to look backwards.
Yeah.
What they were saying is that as an entrepreneur, you'll always be looking at the horizon going, if we could just get there, everything will be okay. But, by its very nature, the horizon is always going to be the horizon.
Yeah,
so
keep walking.
As soon as you get there, you're going to be like, I can remember in the early days having a guy I worked with where I was complaining to him that I had this, I don't know, I can't remember, 20 grand VAT bill or something. And he was like, honestly, Mark, it ain't going to get no better when it's just going to get bigger. And he was right. But what this guy was saying to me, that if you don't look at the horizon for a minute and just have a look back at the journey, then all of a sudden you're able to go like, holy shit, that's amazing how far we come. And of course, you're going to go back to looking at the horizon again. But I think certainly, talking to you, it's a good piece of advice, I think, that you gave.
I'll take it. In all seriousness, times like this, when I speak to people and go on podcasts or I do speaking events or whatever, I come away and I'm like, oh my God. And I had one just now. I went to get a salad before I came here, and we're right by the Shard, right? So you can see these multi-million-pound apartments in the Shard worth £2 billion. You turn around, there's like council flats and homeless sleeping bags, and I kind of stood there. I was like, wowzers, this is a bit of a full circle moment for me, because we've got the homelessness and we've got like this podcast interview near the Shard. And it was just a life I never thought that I'd achieve. I never thought this life would be for me. Yeah. I've never worked towards this life. It's just something that's come, over the time. So there are times where I'm like, geez. And interestingly, many years, I was so scared of going back that I just didn't want to look back. I was just constantly go, get out, escape. And it's only been recently that I've got a few businesses, got a few income streams, got a few assets. I've got a home that I own. I'm not in rented anymore. That whole pressure of your landlord can just sell your house at any moment. Yeah. And so I start thinking, oh my God, maybe I can maybe I can chill, maybe I can. And that's been a revelation to me, really, because I've never had that my whole life. I've never been able to, well, I could have stopped, but I wouldn't have the life I had now if I did.
Yeah, no, I love it. That's brilliant. Thanks very much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.